are businesses affected by Black Swan events? Are you concerned that your organization is going to be sideswiped by a Black Swan event? If so, this video is going to help you focus on your real dangers. First, I'm going to share the true definition of a Black Swan event, and then next, we're going to look at some of the risks that it carries that are both monetary and intangible. Let's get started. A Black Swan event is basically an event that no one predicted will happen, but that typically has a very large and negative impact on individuals. The good news is that there are very few Black Swan events. Even if we take something like the COVID-19 pandemic, while people refer to it as a Black Swan event, the fact of the matter is there are all kinds of virologists and health experts who have been telling us the last few years that we're pretty much due for a huge, massive flu event that could kill a lot of people. That wasn't new news to them. The challenge was that many of them did not have the attention of the media, which would spread the word to everyday people. The lesson to learn from this is that there really are very few Black Swan events. One of the great things about being a futurist and using foresight, which you can use as well, is that it teaches you to look around for signals, to collect information from all kinds of places, not just in your industry. And what happens as a result of that, sometimes you hear little whispers of things from other places and information that you can still apply. So Black Swan events are actually extremely rare. One of the biggest challenges when it comes to Black Swan events, though, is operational interruptions. So let's use that COVID-19 pandemic as an example. Taking all the emotion out of it, we're being completely neutral here, so no one send me any ugly messages or anything, right? But we did see some operational challenges. We had businesses in certain states that were ordered to be shut down. If that's not something that you planned for in your business, that actually caused some businesses to go under, large and mom and pop businesses, right? And so that's one option. Some businesses, we had interruptions because they didn't have enough staff anymore. Other things that could be Black Swan events are technical challenges that cause a system to go down. Now, mind you, hackers aren't really Black Swan anymore. At this point, it's not a matter of if, it's when. But if we're not expecting it, it can certainly feel like a Black Swan event. There can also be supply chain disruptions as an impact of a Black Swan event. And depending on what's happening, we may not be able to produce our products, deliver our services, or even have the staff to follow through on our promises to our customers or clients. One of the next negative effects would obviously be financial challenges. When Black Swan events hit, depending on what they are, it might impact our ability to sell or even receive payments. So for instance, if you think about a bank failure, that could be something that impacts your business in the short term. And maybe you didn't see that happening. Maybe there were no rumblings about that particular bank failing. But next thing you know, you wake up one day and you don't have access to your funds. Now, thanks to FDIC, you're probably going to get those back at some point, depending on the amount that you have deposited in that banking institution. But the point is that in the short term, that Black Swan unpredictable event that you didn't see coming and that was not discussed has impacted your business in a serious financial way. And it's not just a matter of you gaining access to those funds that will make you whole. Oftentimes, the solution might be you having to seek expensive credit in the short term, delay items to clients, which means you might have to issue refunds. Losing access to your finances doesn't just impact you in the short term, but can have long-term consequences as well and can cost you money. Quick question for you though, before we go any further, talking about some of the challenges of Black Swan events. Have you already subscribed to this channel? If you haven't, take a moment and subscribe right now. One of the other impacts of a Black Swan event, specifically, let's look at something like a natural disaster that maybe wasn't that predictable, could be supply chain disruptions. A good example of that would be Hurricane Harvey in Houston, in which we had unprecedented flooding. And you might think to yourself, if you're not familiar with the situation, well, Houston gets hurricanes all the time. It was a freak weather system that kept getting caught in this pattern that stayed over us for days, which caused unprecedented flooding unlike anything we had ever seen. That definitely caused some supply chain interruptions for the businesses that were there. Same thing with our freeze. Houston doesn't typically get the kind of weather to have freezes, and so we did not have the infrastructure to be able to handle that. We don't have the proper tires, we don't salt roads, our pipes are not even made out of the right materials for that, which is why even when people open their pipes up, they still burst anyways. It didn't matter, right? And so we have to understand that those supply chain disruptions can still happen in a black swan event. That's why as futurists, we tend to suggest that people do something called scenario planning so that you have a plan B in all of these other weird situations. Another example of a negative impact of a black swan event would be reputational damage. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, how can anybody hold you responsible if you can't even get to them? Let me ask you a question. When you think of everyone that you know, are they all logical? Are they fair? Are all of our customers and clients fair and logical? No. I'm blessed that I have an incredible group of clients and customers, but there's always one or two, right? And so when you have a promise that you're going to deliver something by a certain period of time, when you think about the fact that during some black swan events, it might halt really serious promises, surgeries, funerals, things that are major in people's lives, delivery of energy or other things that people need for survival, it can hurt your reputation. Fair or not fair, if your competitor can get through that black swan event and still deliver on their promise and you can't, your reputation is going to be the one that's more damaged in that situation. And the last major issue that can come along with black swan events is regulatory changes. Sometimes when a black swan event occurs, it causes government entities and other entities to take a look at what happened and try to protect consumers or businesses against certain negative things that happened as a result of that. And so what can happen is it can actually cause laws and regulations to change. Now, if you operate a business, we all know that that's one of the hardest things to deal with, depending on how the regulation is changed. That can be quite a pricey endeavor. Sometimes it requires additional employee training, as well as changing how we even operate. So a black swan event can not only just impact us in the short term, but in the long term, even in how we operate our businesses. Now, when we think about black swan events, I don't want you just to think about natural disasters or disease. Sometimes they can be human created. So think about the fall of the Berlin Wall or world wars, or even if we were to think about something like 9/11. Now, on one hand, we can say that technically there might have been some information that people could have known that could have helped them predict it, but the overwhelming majority of humans had no idea that those items were going to happen. And as a fact, we had to work around them. Now, it might seem kind of cold that we're talking about business right now when we're thinking about lives lost. But I want you to think about the impact of all of these events that I just discussed on a business, and imagine how planning for the future and having contingency plans in place can help you be better prepared when those types of things happen. Now, speaking of planning for the future, I want to help you plan for the future. You're going to notice in the description of this video, there's a link to download a Future Ready Playbook. This playbook is chock full of activities and worksheets that'll help you plan even so that you're prepared during black swan events. So my suggestion to you is if you haven't already done it, go ahead and download it right now.